everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and joining the show now, ESPN's Kevin Seifert to talk schedule, to talk off season. We finally have the dust settled on the Minnesota Vikings roster. We got OTAs and minicamp coming up next, but I was coming off the golf course and I got a text here from Kevin Seifert, and all I see is the word juicy. And I'm like, Notorious B.I.G.? Like, what are we talking about here? And Kevin, before we even get into it, I'm just going to read from ESPN.com and a little bit of a excerpt from Seth Wickersham's new book, American Kings. Here's what it says, because your juicy description really paid off here. It says, after an up and down final season at USC, Caleb Williams was unsure what he wanted to do as he prepared for the 2024 draft. At the NFL Combine that year, he met with Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell. The two hit it off, and Caleb began to dream of what it would be like to play in Minnesota. I need to go to the Vikings, he told his father. Let's do it, his father replied, but both Caleb and his father Carl knew that a trade to a division rival was extremely unlikely. Bears GM Ryan Poles stood firm, telling Williams, "We're drafting you no matter what." Wow, what a day in the middle of May. Caleb Williams wanted to be a Viking. Seifert reaction.
It reminds me of Patrick Royce always saying, like, whenever he can't figure out what column he's going to write, he said, eventually the Lord will provide. And so today the Lord has provided us with podcast fodder. Some of this, there had been rumblings of the Williams family being not so sold on the Bears / Chicago as a landing point prior to the draft. And if you remember, even JJ McCarthy even said, I think the day he was drafted, maybe the next day, that all the quarterback prospects he had spoken to during the pre-draft process had said that the Vikings were their top choice. He didn't say if he talked to everybody or just that the ones that he did talk to said that. So we couldn't say for sure that meant Caleb Williams. But I think, all the obvious reasons were on the table a year ago. In terms of just the structure a quarterback would be taken into, from coaching to roster to where the team was in their building process. But it wasn't on the record, and it wasn't on the record in this level, these types of quotes. Like, I think if you kept reading there a little further, Caleb Williams realized that the only option he had to do this was to essentially just go public and just attack the Bears as being a team he wouldn't go to, attack the city of Chicago as a team he wouldn't want to play in. And then he says something like, I decided I couldn't go nuclear on the city, or I couldn't nuke the city. I mean, whoa, this is incredible in terms of just like the wording that being used. And this was after the draft, probably, I don't know exactly when the interviews were, but like, this is knowing that he's going to be on the Bears in the 2025 season and playing in Chicago for his home games. And so, that's wild as well. And so I think, this will reinforce and elevate the near godlike status that Kevin O'Connell already has with the football intelligentsia, I guess you could say, and for good reason. There's a lot of, there's just so much evidence and data already out there for why quarterbacks would want to play for him. And it throws a little bit of at least a short-term wrench into Caleb Williams moving forward with the new coaching staff. And, I know that the people that, at least the coach that drafted him last year is no longer there, but the GM still is. And the owners are still the same owners, and the team president is still Kevin Warren, et cetera, et cetera. So overall, a good day for the Vikings. Let's put it that way.
Well, and I spent the car ride home thinking about 7 different things that I wanted to pick apart with this. I think the first is the Vikings angle to it. Kevin O'Connell has a way of communicating with quarterbacks that is his secret sauce to doing this. And sometimes we've talked about it so much. We have a mutual friend who really doesn't like when you say quarterback whisperer, and it's kind of a cliche and all that. And that was Bruce Arians' book name. And it's not usually a real thing because it depends on the talent of the quarterback. It depends on if you have Justin Jefferson and it's easier to whisper to quarterbacks. But why do we think it is that he has this connection with quarterbacks? I mean, even with like Anthony Richardson, when he's pumping him up after the game, or Sam Darnold, we just can't say enough how bad Sam Darnold had been in his career before coming to the Minnesota Vikings. Then
Hmm.
he throws 35 touchdowns, leads them to 14 wins, and is by far the best version of himself. And that was really the canary in the coal mine. Like, if he can do that, because Kirk had been a good quarterback before and just continued to be a good quarterback who seemed to believe in himself a little bit more, unlike me on the greens from about 5 feet away. But Kirk got a little more confidence at the end of games. But we could have said, well, he was good under Stefanski. He got Stefanski a head coaching job in Cleveland. And well, with Josh Dobbs, it's like, well, it didn't really work for Josh Dobbs. But for Sam Darnold, with a whole offseason to work with him, wow, look at those results. And then you hear this from Caleb Williams. Like, this is a real thing.
It is, and I think there's several elements to it. One, I think it just starts with his personal, character, or just the way he carries himself and the way he talks. Like, it's not like classic football alpha that kind of I think is phasing out. Like, if you're, and we've talked about this, when you're around youth sports and you see how coaches get the most out of these kids, it's a lot closer to the way Kevin O'Connell is from a personality standpoint and a positivity standpoint and an encouragement standpoint and a building of confidence standpoint than a lot of some of the greatest coaches in the history of the game. Like, how would people react to Vince Lombardi, right? In 2025, how would they react to George Halas in 2025? Like, it's just different. And so I think there's that connection, and he's obviously younger. He's still a lot older than these players, but he's on the younger side. I think there, you can't say too much about just the streamlined structure of the fact that he's a former quarterback that got to the NFL. He can joke about his career, but he still was one of 96 quarterbacks or so in the league for multiple years. And he's the play caller, so there's nobody running interference between him and the head coach, the quarterback and the head coach. And he speaks the language, and he teaches his scheme in a way that makes a lot of sense. It's not it's hard to describe in a short period of time, but basically it's the concepts apply to all the plays. It's not that you need to know what your first read is on this play and that second play and third play. It's like a more of an all-encompassing approach. And it's all very easy to pick up all that stuff in the 15 minutes that you spend in a combine interview, let alone in film sessions over the course of an off season. And so there's lots of other reasons, but to me, those are the things that jump out as far as the quick impression. And once that word of mouth starts, like, he'd really have to do a U-turn in terms of the way he talks and acts for that reputation to be shattered.
And I think that we focus mostly on the positivity because it's the most clear to us. The Vikings put out a video that said, with him at the end of a game saying, "Sam Darnold, you're my favorite person of all time. I love you forever.
Yeah.
Please complete this pass."
Yeah.
But what they don't show you on the video is before the play where he is pointing out something with the defense, or behind the scenes in a meeting where every week he was meeting with JJ McCarthy and they're going over what happened the previous week. And I think that what Kevin O'Connell has, a tool in his bag that not every football person has, is the ability to communicate very clearly. Sometimes we get word salad answers, but if you look at the answers that he'll give us on technical stuff, and you go back and look at it, you're like, I understand, and I don't know football like Sam Darnold or any of these NFL players, and yet he has a way of distilling things that are very, very clear. And I think if you're a quarterback in a world where it's so muddy all the time, where you have so many different things that you have to understand and memorize and everything else, someone who can show you, here is why we do this, and I'm communicating this to you in a way that you process it and understand it. I thought we saw throughout the season a very confident Sam Darnold with where he was supposed to throw the football and just understanding all that sort of stuff. And then you add the energy, you add the fact that he is a younger coach than some of these other guys, and also that he's the head coach.
Yeah.
So it's his show and it's run his way. So it's not going to be like, well, the offensive coordinator, and we've been through this with Zimmer and multiple coordinators, Well, the offensive coordinator wants to do it one way, but the head coach is saying, no, we have to do it another way. Well, that's never going to be a conflict in Minnesota. Folks, I'm trying a new thing to try to stop going to fast food restaurants all the time with my busy schedule. It is called Tempo Meals. Tempo is a weekly delivery service that delivers chef crafted meals from a dietitian approved menu fresh to your door. Their perfectly portioned lunches and dinners take the guesswork out of eating. They're fully prepared. They can be heated up in the microwave in just 3 minutes. This is easy when we're on free agency watch. I've got another box just showing up the other day, and talk about easy and delicious. I got the Korean beef quesadilla, Tuscan butter shrimp, and barbecue chicken. All of them were easy, super quick to make, and not all of them have to be chicken and beef. They've got tons of different options for you. For a limited time, Tempo is offering my listeners 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/purple insider. That is tempomeals.com/purple insider. 60% off your first box. tempomeals.com/purple insider. Rules and restrictions apply.
And not even like, it doesn't even have to be like the head coach wants something black and the play caller wants something white. Like it's even just in the gray where you can really have inefficiencies, and you can really like hold yourself back from whatever the optimization of your offense. And when the head coach is that same guy, and like, again, JJ McCarthy explicitly said, like, when he was talking about why he wanted to come to Minnesota, that like defensive head coaches in Chicago at the time, Matt Eberflus, Washington with Dan Quinn, New England with Gerard Mayo, and maybe like he probably didn't know Atlanta wanted a quarterback, but there's a defensive head coach there as well. And so like that's appealing, no matter who the guy is. Like that's an appealing structure as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And then you add in the history of Vikings quarterbacks overachieving and the history of Bears quarterbacks underachieving. But let's go to the Caleb Williams part of this.
Yeah.
The Chicago market and fan base is not always the most forgiving, I think. And what came to mind for me last year is I saw a guy who didn't seem very comfortable in his skin in Caleb Williams. Now, there were times where it was magical and incredible, and we saw that at Soldier Field right up close. There were also times where it looked like he would rather be anywhere else than playing for the Chicago Bears, including the game at US Bank Stadium,
Yeah.
where he's showing on the sideline and he's
Yeah.
kind of falling apart and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there were many different moments like that throughout the season. He didn't have the confidence to call a timeout on Thanksgiving. We all blamed Eberflus. He deserved the blame. But still, the QB can throw up the T anytime he wants to. And it just didn't feel like he was really embracing that leadership franchise #1 overall pick type of role. And then you saw it with even the way some of his receivers responded to him and his teammates. And you have to wonder now whether this seeped into that, right? Like if you are in a place where you had your first impression, this is not going to be great for me, and then it wasn't going swimmingly, it's not going to make it better that you thought it was the worst place for you.
No, it's not. And then you and I have mixed feelings about the Caleb part of this, because like, to take a step back, like as great of a job as O'Connell did last year with Sam Darnold, I will always say that like Sam Darnold was in a spot in his life and his career where he was ready to be better. And like it's not just the organization, it's not just the coach, it's the player too. It always has to be the player. Like it's not like he's in the TV show Severance and stepping into an elevator, and as soon as you get into the Vikings floor, you're suddenly able to become a great quarterback. Like it has to be in you. You have to, it has to be part of what you're able and ready to do. And so like, I don't know how Caleb Williams would have been at any of the other stops in Washington. The other place we know where success was attainable was in Washington. Would he have been as good as Jaden Daniels was last year in Washington? I don't know. Would he, if he got drafted to Minnesota and ended up playing, would any of those things shown up, despite O'Connell's work? Maybe, I don't know. And so part of this, like, I just think it just needs to be pointed out, like some of this is some of what we saw last year is on Caleb, no matter what the structure is. But there are reasons. It's not just like the spin of the dial that a quarterback, you have to go back so long, to before any of us were born to find a really top end quarterback in a Bears uniform, playing like a top, quarterback. Like there have been a lot of organizational reasons, whether it was what the ownership was willing to spend or what the head coaches, priorities were. There's been a lot of defensive head coaches in the history of the Bears, and Caleb Williams got drafted by one. There's not always been a great effort to accumulate skill players on the Bears, and whether that was due to the idea that it's bad weather, bad field surface, I don't know if there was like a reason behind that, or if they just always identified themselves as a running and defensive oriented team. But there are some reasons why lots of guys who might have had more success elsewhere did not in Chicago. And so, this to me, like I don't think it's going to materially change the arc of his career, but it's certainly all the insight we have so far into Caleb Williams leading up to the draft, getting drafted, and the year after the draft is not conducive to him being really successful in Chicago.
And you think about, this is the third time in a row they've drafted a quarterback, then immediately fired a coach, and then paired somebody else with the quarterback that they drafted. That is horrendous process.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there's a lot of success stories where that happens, where the coach gets fired immediately and then you have to pair somebody else to try to solve that problem. I was thinking along the lines for Caleb Williams of just what your general disposition is coming in to be that franchise quarterback, because Joe Burrow joined a worse organization, or at least just as bad, in the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'm sure behind the scenes, Joe Burrow was thinking, what am I going to do here?
Yeah.
Until he maybe saw Jamar Chase play against the Vikings in 2021, then probably thought, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
But you never got any sense from him that he wasn't like the dude right away. This is my franchise. I'm taking this. Even when his first year, where it was going pretty tough for him and they weren't winning games, it's still, you had that kind of vibe. And I'll even say that for Trevor Lawrence, even though it's gone badly for him, that you've never thought that it wasn't like his team who's worse than the Jaguars as a franchise. That's what happens if you pick number one.
Yeah.
But with Caleb Williams here, if you go into a place, think about if you get invited to a party and you're saying to your wife before you go, do we have to go to this party? I'm not going to have fun. I don't know anybody. Do they even have food? Like when you get there, are you going to be the life of the party? Or is every single thing that goes wrong going to be like, oh, this organization, this coaching staff? And I just felt like that was his disposition for all of last year. It wasn't I'm not going to lose by any means possible. It was like, oh, Eberflus. And even if he wasn't going up there and saying it, offensive line, the body language, the way he acted, I thought you could tell. So now the question is, can Caleb Williams turn this attitude around with Ben Johnson and the things that they've done around him?
Well, it's interesting because I think like the other thing that popped up about his approach or the way he plays is that I think he does have a level of like positional arrogance that he can will the team to win through like an off schedule play where he's scrambling around a million different times and finally finds somebody open. There's a lot of that in college. We all kind of thought, like you can't do that in the NFL. And he did have more than a few of those type of plays. He also got lit up on a lot of them as well and took a lot of sacks as well. So I don't know like what the future for that part is, but he did show like you want someone, as the Vikings say, who loves football. And if you love football, you go into whatever organization that drafts you and you say, like, I am going to flip this thing around. Like, we're going to flip it around together. Everywhere I've been able to do that. There's no doubt in my mind that I can do it along with my teammates and coaches or what have you. And like whatever issues exist, we're going to plow through them or we're going to jump over them. And like that mentality, we certainly didn't get the sense is something that he carries himself with. It doesn't mean you can't be good, but and again, he did show an interest at least in trying to like will teams to win through his own like creativity or off schedule play. But that would concern me a little bit that and maybe he's just being smart. Like, Kevin O'Connell says all the time or has said last year that organizations fail quarterbacks before quarterbacks fail organizations. Maybe we should be giving credit to Caleb Williams for recognizing that, and recognizing that no matter how good he is, or no matter how much he wants to win, or no matter how much his will to never give in is, that you can't do it alone, and you need more structure than what the Bears historically have provided. And so I guess there's that too, but like, there was enough, as you said, body language and comments and, big size and like all those kind of things, including during the Hard Knocks over the summer, that you wonder whether he's going to end up being a guy that needs to have everything around him straight before he can be really good.
Well, and when you're talking about somebody who was discussed as being a Andrew Luck level prospect,
Yeah.
I didn't think that. I thought that was unfair. I think it's a hype world that we love to put all those type of things on people unfairly sometimes. And there was a lot of ignoring of the fact he was one of the worst quarterbacks under pressure in college, and that he had a
Yeah.
huge fumbling problem and all that sort of stuff. That he was going to need development, and there was no way that franchise was not starting him as QB1 right from the very beginning. The Patriots, even though they end up firing their coach, handled it, I thought, a lot better with a younger quarterback in Drake May, where Jaden Daniels was 24. Even Michael Penix, though, got his time to develop
Yeah.
throughout the season, but Bo Nix, 24 years old, so he had
Yeah.
been around a lot more. And it wasn't just, hey, Caleb Williams, come in and play football for the Chicago Bears. It was erase history, Caleb Williams, right? There's a
yeah.
lot more to it than just they're drafting a guy.
And that's something I had forgotten. I was looking through stats for something. He led the league in attempts last year, I think. Like through more like you're talking about a guy who needs development, guy who's not, didn't get all the years that Jaden Daniels got, and all the attempts that Bo Nix got at all the different colleges he played at. And like, not only are you just throwing him out to the wolves in on day one of OTAs, but like, you're having him throw more than any other quarterback in the entire league. It was like 660 passes or something like that. And so like that's always struck me too, is like, why are they, why can't a team in Chicago who signed, I think, they spent some money at the running back position last year. Why can't they, run it more, and not keep putting him in these positions where he's having to make huge plays? Like, that's just textbook ruin quarterback approach.
Right, exactly. And so, to your point, I mean, he was certainly right that it would have been better for him to end up with the Minnesota Vikings. But I also think that when we look at Burrow, go back, where were the Colts before Peyton Manning? A disaster. Like, where were the Colts with Andrew Luck? They were tanking on purpose. I mean, there's most of the time. How about poor Cam Ward? Are we feeling good about the Titans right now? They need a new stadium. They need a new everything across their roster. But that's the guy who's supposed to be the one who turns it back that other way, not the one who can point at the surroundings and say, well, it wasn't really my fault. That's supposed to be your talent transcending all of that.
Yep.
But it seems like the attitude was really, well, I'm, facing an uphill battle rather than I'm going to be the dude that turns this around. So let me ask you one more question about this. Such a captivating little news nugget.
It is.
And plus this is our week one preview of Vikings, and because now this will be a story. I guarantee that this will still be a story and being talked about by the time the Vikings play there, just because we have to. What if it had happened? Like, it would never would have happened in a million. You're not trading him to Minnesota. You're not trading him to play him twice a year. But if he was here, what would that be like?
So if he had somehow gotten to Minnesota as a rookie last year with Sam Darnold here, I think it would have started the same way. I think Sam Darnold takes all the first team reps in OTAs. He takes all the first team reps in at least the start of training camp, and then maybe a little bit earlier, Caleb Williams starts mixing in, before JJ had, and maybe he has a little bit of a better chance to win in week one, or win the job for week one. But if I would have had to bet, I would have bet Sam Darnold had been the starter week one if all things had been equal and Sam had kept his head, knowing that Caleb Williams is the one that's behind him. But it's, and if the season had gone the same, he wouldn't have played much at all, I don't think. And that's okay. And I think that you would be going into this year thinking like, oh, I can't wait to see what Kevin O'Connell did with Caleb Williams in a year of practice. And so, but if he'd had to get on the field, the thing that I like is an unanswerable question there, and maybe you have thoughts on it, I don't know, is I know Kevin likes mobility in a quarterback when necessary. I don't know that he would have been like encouraging him to scramble kind of mindlessly as much as he did last year. I think he really like Kevin likes his scheme. He likes the routes that are being run, and he usually feels like there's a place to throw the ball. And getting back to why people want to play for him is because there usually is a place to throw it for a nice gain. And so I think like that's something they would have had to try, I think, at least in some ways, to coach out of him is like throw the ball, run the play, see it and throw it. And like if they run a defense that wasn't expected, or they play something, or guy falls down, like what, then use your running abilities and your improvisational skills. But like that would have been where the rubber meets the road, as to what extent would they alter what their expectations for the position are to accommodate those particular skills that neither Kirk Cousins nor Sam Darnold really had, or interested in utilizing, even if they did have it. And how much would they try to coach that out of them?
Well, that's a hard thing to figure out too, because that offense that Shane Waldron put in did not seem very conducive to him getting the ball out of his hands. It
Yeah.
was a disaster. And then they seemed to rein it into the point where he was throwing 60% screens because they were afraid of him doing that too
Mm-hmm.
much. And here's a question that I have, though. After watching the game at US Bank Stadium, and this is where I'll just turn up the heat on a take, and we'll leave it there and see where it goes in the future. I think JJ McCarthy is a much better fit for Kevin O'Connell. I think JJ McCarthy could be a lot better than Caleb Williams at the end of the day if Williams continues to play like this and be like this. And one of the reasons is because I think JJ McCarthy sees the field better. I saw on the tape of the US Bank Stadium game against the Bears, open receivers who
Yeah.
were not getting the football.
Yeah.
And well, Thomas Brown, I don't think is a total fool. And they were calling plays and guys were getting open. You saw Keenan Allen, who we know is a get open machine,
Yeah.
just being like, okay, well, I am having a lot of fun out here, just wandering around wide open, and the blitzes and all that sort of stuff. He drops his eyes and he scrambles. And I don't know if there's an easy fix to that of
Yeah.
someone who doesn't see the field very well. Now, I think that Darnold had that issue in his career, but I think Darnold's biggest issue was just him believing he could make every throw and then getting picked off or
Yeah.
sacked all the time. Whereas Williams, I wonder about his size and just his ability to see things progress, because that was what was ignored when they were calling him the next Mahomes, because Mahomes plays in structure about 70% of the time.
Yeah.
The other 30% is absolutely magical and all-time great. But most of the time he's running the offense that he's asked to run. And I did not see much of that for Williams. So I think that JJ McCarthy ultimately, though he is less physically gifted than Williams, is a much better fit for how O'Connell wants to play.
Assuming that how he wants to play is what they've done the first 3 years. He's never, like I said, never had a quarterback that had the improvisational
Right.
skills that Caleb did. So we may never find out, like if that it's just if he's played this way because that's who he's had, or if he's playing this way because that's how he wants to play. But I do think that there's almost zero doubt that JJ McCarthy is a better fit for the Vikings scheme than Caleb Williams was for the scheme that they started off the year trying, which is just too bad for anybody who has genuine interest in the Bears doing well.
How about the level of awkwardness? Now, week one, you go to Soldier Field. Kevin O'Connell's standing over there and like, oh, look, the girl who you really wanted to date is at the prom now across the room, not the one you're here with. That is uncomfortable, I think, for the entire organization. And a part of me thinks, why did they tell anyone that they thought this? That would be something that I would not have revealed. And credit to Seth Wickersham for getting this. But like, why would you tell anyone if there was another team you wanted to be with? That's another awareness thing of Caleb Williams,
Yeah.
because now of all the teams to start the season, if it's week 7, well, so much has happened by that point. You start the season with, I know who's got Monday Night Football. It's you guys. And what do you think they're going to talk about leading up to that game is, hey, remember when Caleb Williams said he wanted to be a Viking and not a Bear?
Yeah, I can only assume that that was part of a larger conversation about like how it was pre-draft, how it was
Yep.
the first year, but now Ben Johnson, who is an offensive-minded head coach, is going to call the plays. Is there, you know, his number one job is to get Caleb Williams to play at a high level so the Bears can win games over the course of the next 10 years. And so I can only assume that was part of a larger conversation that led into like, yeah, but now they finally got it the way I want it. But that part was not in the excerpt, at least. So we'll see.
Right. Right. And I do think that they do have it how he wants it. And then talk about the schedule
Yeah.
and what it means for the Vikings. And if you're the person online who's like, who cares about a schedule release? Look at all the fun we're having
Oh, yeah.
talking about the
Yeah.
schedule. Come on now, folks.
It,
Uh,
yeah.
but
If nothing else, it makes it easier to like conceive of what this list of opponents looks like and what it's going to feel like on a week to week basis.
Well, and in this case, the order of operations actually matters a lot. My first run through picking the schedule was very good at the beginning, very good at the end, and not so good in the middle. But
Yeah.
I do love the juice to starting out at Soldier Field, nighttime. That place has real spooky drama to it, and two teams that drafted quarterbacks. Starting out the first three games of all 2024 draft pick quarterbacks, just interesting on its own, and then you go into all hell breaking loose in the middle of this season. What was your kind of big takeaway from the way that this schedule is structured?
That is, it's a doozy, man. It's like you know, JJ McCarthy will get the most intense, incredibly intense indoctrination imaginable. I mean, I guess maybe they could have been worse or harder, but you'd have to work to find something that will test a first year starter, not a rookie, but a first year starter more than what that starts in the beginning. And it's not like, I mean, there's a few spots there where there's some soft spots, like getting a bye before they have to play the Eagles, and there's a mini bye before one of their Lions games, and a few other things. But like, even once they catch their breath at the bye after the trip to Europe, there's a stretch near the end of the year where I think 4 of their 5 games are on the road. 3 of them, Green Bay, Seattle, and the New York, are potentially like bad weather games. And then they come back and finish the year with, is it Lions Packers? Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Lions
Yep.
Packers. I don't have it in front of me, but and so like I could conceive, and I put this in my analysis, like them going through that really rough stretch of 4 out of 5 games on the road and having to come back home for the last 2, needing to win both of them to make the playoffs. And I think we all agree that like this is a playoff caliber roster. It's a very good roster, and if they get playoff caliber play from the quarterback over the course of the year, that they'll make it. But like anything short, like they're not going to get any breaks. At least that are foreseeable right now to get them into the playoffs. If they make it, they'll have earned it. And it's as I think Ben Gessling said this, and I agree, it's probably the toughest schedule that he's seen in the 14, 15 years he's covered the team. And I can't remember many others that were harder either.
Sorry, I think I may have said 3 straight, but just back to back 2024 quarterbacks. And then they play
Yeah.
later on Jaden Daniels as well. The thing is about this schedule that stands out to me is if you just checked every box of pressure cooker stuff for a franchise, so you have endless national TV games, including playing on Christmas. Merry Christmas to everybody. Hopefully you can compartmentalize between your holidays and the stress of Minnesota Vikings football in the midst of potentially a playoff race. They are in the toughest division in the NFL. There's another box checked. They have to travel overseas. I think it helps them overall because they get to stay there, because they don't have to go to Pittsburgh. But still, that is a massive disruption to an entire organization. And then, okay, there's a box checked. You have to play the Super Bowl champion. There's a box checked. You have to play kind of on the marquee with your quarterback and the other drafted quarterbacks, which always becomes a big deal. Every single one of those things is on this schedule. Yet still, when I picked it at the end of the day, I ended up with 11 wins for the
Okay.
Vikings. And I wanted your feedback on that. Is it too many? Is it overly optimistic? Because here's how I pick. There's two different philosophies. You could pick by what you think, or you could pick by expectation.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to lean more toward like a 70-30. I kind of pick more toward expectation. I think with what they've done here and the decision they made at quarterback, the confidence that they had to have to move on from Darnold, you should be able to still win 11 games against, even though there's a lot of tough teams on the schedule.
Yep, and I think that matches what I said in terms of needing to come back and win those last two games to make the playoffs, because in this division, 11 wins might be necessary to make the playoffs. That's what the Packers had last year, and weren't they they were a wild card? I guess they were the second wild card. So yeah, like that's what was needed last year, and so and I think that they can do that for sure. It's going to require like more than replacement level play from the quarterback. Like, he can't just be, to me, with this schedule, even though they have a really good team around him, he can't just be okay and get to 11 wins. So I don't know how much you took that into account, but like 11 wins means quarterback playing above replacement level, which means above average basically. And so like that, and that's not undoable. Like, there's no reason to doubt that he can, be a top, which that basically means you're a top 16 quarterback. I think that's doable, but like, it still has to be done. Like all that, like JJ McCarthy is at the peak of expectation in that we haven't seen him do a single thing wrong yet, because he was great in the preseason. He did what fine during training camp. We haven't seen him do anything wrong yet. So there's nothing other than the unknown to doubt him. We'll see some things he does wrong, because that's just human in training camp and in the preseason and maybe early in the year. But to get to those 11 wins, to get through the schedule, to make the playoffs, he's going to have to be an above average quarterback at least.
So I'm kind of working my way backwards into how good I think McCarthy can be based on the decision to let Darnold go. Because they could have franchise tagged Darnold and said, we were a 14-win team. How about we run it back and get a guard in the first round and a guard and maybe a couple other role players and Isaiah Rodgers, and that's all we can afford, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And they haven't really dipped into the giant restructures that they could have done. So they could have done maybe 60% of the stuff that they did around JJ McCarthy. But the fact that they did not do that, to me, says that the people who have been closest to him, especially Kevin O'Connell, throughout the last year, even though there was a flirtation with Aaron Rodgers, still ultimately landed on, it is better to move on from a quarterback who was top 10 than to stick with him. And that, to me, must mean that they think that JJ McCarthy can be this guy. They would know better than us watching from the sideline on training camp what they really have there, or one preseason game. So that's where we should set the bar for JJ McCarthy. And I think when you look at the recent history of young quarterbacks, we're always saying like, well, he's got no experience, or he's pretty young still. And yet you see Brock Purdy year 2 in the Super Bowl. You see Jaden Daniels in year 1 in the NFC Championship. It has been quite common in the NFL. Even Joe Burrow, who we brought up, was in the Super Bowl in the second year of his career. It is quite common that young quarterbacks come in, they're more prepared than ever, and he is the most prepared first-year quarterback starting, because he had the whole season to observe and learn and everything else and go through that whole post-draft process. He should be ready to take this team to 11 wins. And there isn't any part of the roster that I would say, man, well, he's going to be in trouble because of this or that or the other thing. Like, they have solidified pretty much every position here to be in a spot where he can win that many games.
Yeah, I think that it would have. I mean, I don't know why their opinion on him would have changed since the draft, since they drafted him, and I think they felt then that he was somebody that could take them where they want to go. And really, the decision that, to me, like, they had to come to for this year was what's his floor? Like, do we think that in a worst case scenario, if we go to him, that he'll be serviceable enough for us to have good chances to win most of our games? And so that's the only new information they had to judge, I think, because the team building uh, you know, just intelligence of it, like lean strongly towards letting Sam go and going with the guy you drafted and at least 2 or 3 more years of a rookie contract, and then being able to do all the things that they did at the offensive line, defensive line, et cetera, running back to help him out. And so that just required them not to necessarily think that he's ready to take them to be Brock Purdy this year, but that his floor is high enough that this entire season won't be crashed by his poor play.
Right. And one thing we can expect, and this happened with someone like CJ Stroud, is that there are ups and downs, roller coasters with young players, and they're going to have to work through that themselves because we know this in the NFL. If you have bad back to back games, it feels like the season is over, the sky is
Yeah.
falling, everything. And what I have observed already, Kevin, and I wrote about this the other day, is that the national media has already latched on to the Vikings and JJ McCarthy as a nice, well packaged debate topic because they moved on from a really good quarterback and he's a first rounder and this team is good. So welcome to relevancy, everyone. Congratulations. You made it. It's been many years since you've been there, but that also means that we talk about that pressure cooker. And that's another box to check too, is that everybody is watching this
Yeah.
situation to say, was it the right call to move away from Sam Darnold? And that is a lot of pressure, I think, on the entire organization. How they navigate that will impact where this ends up as well.
And it's interesting to me because it seems like a world ago, but there was not everybody was in agreement on JJ McCarthy in the draft. And he had taken Michigan to the championship, but and we don't have to go through it all again, but he had not thrown the ball very much. It was historically low levels of passes for a top 10 quarterback in the history of the modern draft. And so there were people who were he's getting the Michigan shine. If he was if he had done exactly what he had done at Miami of Ohio or whatever, nobody would think JJ McCarthy is a first round quarterback, let alone a 10. And so there was definitely this mode of thought that if he was so good, why were they running the ball so much? And it kind of looking past the fact that the coach, at the time there was very much a run oriented guy and even is in the NFL. But so that I think there's an undercurrent of that still in what a lot of the national media because I heard you talking about Colin Cowherd and various people. And I think that's still, whether it's being talked about or not, it's still an undercurrent of how people assess the Vikings decision and how people assess JJ McCarthy's, the degree to which he can play well this year is that there was a lot of debate about whether he was even a first round quarterback in the first place. But because he went to Michigan and because he was young and because he's got a really engaging personality and they won the national championship, that here he is, a guy swept up in a reputation that he didn't earn or whatever the argument would have been. And the Vikings, they did a lot of work on it, on him. And they looked at, O'Connell called them weighty downs, the plays that really mattered when he was asked to throw the ball and what that looked like. And he felt very confident about it. And they spent tons of time working them out. And so they felt like this was a case of a quarterback who just was in a system where you don't throw it 40 times a game. And it wasn't going to change whether he was capable of doing it or not. But I do think that adds to what you're talking about is it's not as if everyone was in agreement that this was a top 10 type prospect at the time.
Well, and I remember at the combine, it was the main conversation from everybody that you'd go up and talk to, hey, so you buying this McCarthy thing?
Yeah.
You think he's a real top prospect? He was a debatable, probably the most debatable prospect that there was, because even though Penix went very high, a lot of the draft analysis community was not as high on him or Bo Nix. And there were people who thought McCarthy was a late first round, a Jackson Dart caliber type of prospect. And then there were people who were very high on him and said, well, I'd take him. The Vikings are going to have to trade up and then things like that. There was probably the widest spread on him than any other quarterback in that entire draft, which will crop up again as we go, because we know there's just nothing in the world that makes football like football as debating quarterbacks. I mean, just flip on a regular day in May on ESPN. I guarantee you there's some quarterback debate going on TV. It's the most captivating position in sports.
Sure.
And now the Vikings have a controversial decision to some extent of moving on, not to us, but to the outside world. That's a hot
Yeah.
story. And then also the fact that you can go back and remember how debatable he was as
Yeah.
a prospect. And that's why when Cowherd was reaching back into what he was at Michigan, I was like, well, wait, I've seen an entire training camp of him. To
Yeah.
me, he looked like a top 10 type of talent, as we saw with NFL players on an NFL field, and a guy who at age 21, you grow fast,
Yeah.
was bigger and stronger and threw the ball harder than we had expected when he
Mm-hmm.
got there. But you're right that there was like 10 of us who watched every practice on the sideline, not the national media who's going to debate him. I will be just curious where that exists as this season goes along, because Kevin O'Connell has not had that. They have not been in the spotlight. They have not been a debatable team. They've been a cute story twice that gets a little pat on the head and maybe a Dan Orlovsky breakdown of a touchdown. But this is new territory for this team.
And they haven't ever been just crushed. At least this group that, since Kwesi became Kwesi adofo-mensah became the general manager and Kevin O'Connell became the head coach. 2023 was obviously a tough year, but everybody's like, oh, Kirk, quarterback gets hurt. What are you going to do? But they've never really been in a position where people, like, the prevailing argument amongst, whether it's the football intelligentsia or just the talking heads or whoever, is that they're doing something wrong and that they failed and that that the choice they made has not worked out. And that isn't, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but like, they've never been in that position where even like for a small period of time, like if JJ McCarthy has a 2 interception game followed by a 3 interception game and you lose both of them, and like just this small little part of a season that happens, every quarterback goes through it. And this is not to say that that people would just be, would be blowing up the entire building, but and it's also not to say that these guys live and die by what, Stephen A. Smith or Colin Cowherd or me or you are saying, but they also haven't really had much of it either. And so we don't know, are they sensitive? Are they going to build? Is that going to help them rally the troops, or is it just going to be something that doesn't have an effect one way or the other? But it's something to keep in mind as well.
Well, I just think that it's a very, very real thing in the year 2025 that anybody who could say, oh, I tune out the media or something. Okay, well, in 1996, maybe, and they didn't even then, they all read the newspaper then, but it was so much easier. You just don't pick up a paper. You just don't turn on the TV to a certain channel. But now there is absolutely no way to ignore it. And the ownership is going to know what's being said on TV, and they're going to have right. Like, it starts to build the pressure inside of a building when this happens. And the last time, it was in 2018, where the national media was at every training camp practice. And when they lost the game to Buffalo, they got destroyed, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And they sort of pulled out of that at one point and then collapsed kind of under the weight of it as that season went along. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying it's been a while. And it is a real thing for sure. You can't just say, well, just tune it all out, because that's not possible in our world today. So let me ask you one more question. 17 games. We got some road trips. We got some quarterbacks who might make the Hall of Fame. We got quarterbacks who are winning Super Bowls. This is, if you're talking about a schedule to just observe, if this wasn't through the lens of, wow, this is pretty tough on the Minnesota Vikings, if it was instead, I love football and want to watch football, there's a lot of good stuff here. What is the best football contest on the Minnesota Vikings schedule?
To me, it's the week after the bye when they host the Eagles. Like, there's your Super Bowl champion. There's the team you went to in 2022, and I think was it 2022 or 23 when they went there? Yeah,
23.
And they've lost there twice. I can't remember what years were. They all run together, and both games were not by a small amount of points, but both of them were actually more winnable than the final score indicated if they had made a few less mistakes. And I'm thinking a few Kirk Cousins interceptions, and then a Justin Jefferson fumble over the pylon. And so like this is a team that has vexed them. And when I was looking at the playoffs last year, people say, well, who's the team that worries you the most? And maybe I should have said the Rams, but I said the Eagles. Like that's a team that from especially the way they're built, offensive line, defensive line was just built to tear them up, I think. And the Vikings, intuitively seem to get that and address their offensive line, address their defensive line this offseason in ways we've talked about. And so that's the test to find out, like, did they actually, come out, net ahead on those moves, and playing at home against the Super Bowl champions, can they do it? And so like, that's the, when you ask that question, that's the first game that comes to mind. So I'll go with that one.
For me, it's I have not had a chance to cover a Lamar Jackson game
Okay.
against the Vikings because they played him in 17. That was still Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
And then in 21, they went to Baltimore, but that was 2021. There was no reason to be traveling to road games at that point. And not only that, that was the game where a team employee pushed someone on a third down in the sideline and they threw a flag, gave him a first down, helped Baltimore ultimately go on to win that game in overtime. That was kind of a messy game. Jackson wasn't even good that day, but coming off of the season that he had last year, 41 touchdowns, almost 1,000 yards rushing, just one of the most exciting players in NFL history. And we haven't seen him at all.
Interesting.
So now, getting him here, I think will be a really cool thing to see how. That's the other thing too. The quarterbacks that Brian Flores is about to face. I mean, we know that he's as good as it gets for his job, but there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done with the Jaden Daniels, the Lamar Jackson, the scramblers, the playmakers versus a defense that is, I think, more talented than last year. So many freaking good matchups on this schedule. And you and I will be following the journey together throughout the year. I can't wait for that. But
for sure.
How about one more tiny thing? How will you deal with JJ McCarthy and OTA reports? Because I've been trying to think about how should I just go fully over the top ludicrous in my reactions to his OTA practices, or be reasonable human beings about this?
The first thing that came to mind is I was standing at rookie camp a couple weeks ago with our friend Judd Zolgad, who was keeping track of completions and incompletions and yards in 7-on-7s. And I thought he was doing it as a joke. And then I watched his report and he actually referenced that. So part of it made, like, at least to mandate that I pay attention, I might just keep completions and incompletions for JJ and maybe where he's dispersing the ball just for fun. And I don't know whether I'll use it or not, or how I'll put context around it, but I think I'm going to do that because I think, if nothing else, it keeps me from running my mouth for an hour and a half during practice and instead actually watching. So I'm definitely going to keep the stats, and I'll decide how to use them at the appropriate time.
To me, it's going to be all about feel. I'm a feel guy. You can use your data if you want. I'm going to be a feel guy. Like, just how does it feel with him out there running the team as QB1? Yeah. Does it look like it's a smooth operation? Does it look like it needs work? But I should warn everybody, I'll probably give this PSA many times. Last year in OTAs, it didn't look too good. And in training camp, it looked really good. So it's this used to be something we barely paid attention to at all. Oh, the Vikings have a practice in the middle of the summer? Like, sure, I'll wander out there and stand on the hill in the sun. And now it's like, as you said, like get those Zolgad goggles on and start watching every single rep closely. But I'm excited for that.
Yeah, no, it's going to be good. And I will say, like, just to throw the gauntlet down, like, it should be good in OTAs. Like last year, totally understandable that it wasn't as a rookie coming off the draft process. But, everybody says he's healthy. Everybody says he looks great. Like, it's okay, like, to expect it to look pretty good in OTAs. And there might be some times when O'Connell devises something trying to make him look bad, and just to see how he reacts to adversity, and we'll make our assessments accordingly. But like, I'm okay with going into even OTAs with a relatively high expectation for what he should look like.
ESPN Seifert, pressure on
Yes,
McCarthy in
I like it.
OTA
I like it.
practices.
I like it.
Kevin, you're the best. I really appreciate this. And I'm glad we had like a juicy story, as you
For
said, to
sure.
discuss today. This made it a lot more fun. But I always have a great time when you're on the show. So thank you so much for your time, sir.
No problem.